Hello, Abnormal Investigations. I've got another encounter for you. This one here is oh, it's an Alaska encounter. It is a Sasquatch, and sounds like it can, well, let's just say, probably very aggressive. I hope you all enjoy this. We got a lot of good guests getting ready to come on the show also. If you're not subscribed, I would invite you to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our boots on the ground coming up. A lot of our breakdowns we're going to be doing and investigations. And also, check and make sure you are still subscribed. YouTube has been unsubscribing people, so from time to time, check, make sure you're still subscribed, and that you have the all checked to get the notifications for everything we do. Alright, guys. Are y'all ready to jump into this one? This is going to be a good one, I'm pretty sure. In the summer of 2020, I embarked on a solo hike in the deep spruce forests of coastal Alaska. My goal was to explore an area I had driven past but never hiked before. On the weekends, or after work, in the long Alaskan days, I would pack a backpack and head out to explore this beautiful state. In the early September of 2020, I decided to explore an area I had driven past but never actually hiked. There aren't any trails in this area, and it's not the easiest place to get, so I didn't expect to see much out there, except for maybe some moose or perhaps a fox. That being said, moose can get aggressive sometimes, and coastal Alaska is known for wolves, coyotes, wolverines, black bear, and brown bears, so I thought I'd better take my Taurus 44 Magnum revolver with me. It had been my companion on many hikes, and though I had never fired it at anything but paper targets, it made me feel more secure. Most wild animals, even bears, can be scared off with shouting and aggressive posturing. They're not generally looking for a fight with something ready to fight back. Usually they're pretty peaceful as long as you don't surprise them, come between them, or go after their babies or come between them and a kill. All the same, it's better to be safe than sorry. And there are other things you can do whenever you're deep in the wilderness and away from any help, more cunning and more dangerous than wild animals. Today I was headed for just such a place. To reach it, you have to cross a river, and the only way to do that safely is to cross a railroad bridge. We're not really supposed to walk across there, but as long as there are no trains coming, I figured no one would care, as it's in the middle of nowhere. Next to the state forest I was headed to is a native Alaskan hunting ground, through only my friend we'll call Jack had been known to hunt there. I parked my truck off the side of the road, hiked to the trail that leads to the bridge, and slipped down it quietly in the early morning. As I crossed the bridge, a strange feeling of unease started to tug at me. Everything seemed normal. I hadn't seen, heard, or smelt anything strange, and it was a bright, sunny Alaskan day of 60 degrees. Absolutely perfect weather for hiking. I chalked it up to being nervous about being seen crossing the railroad trestle, and pushed down the nervousness. It was easy to see that things on this bridge was not made for foot travel. There's no walking lane for humans, and the old rotting timbers of the railroad ties are 9 or 10 inches apart. Many were so rotted out it wasn't sure, and I wasn't sure, if it would even hold my weight. My feelings of uneasiness grew as I slowly picked my way across the bridge, realizing that if a train happens to come, I might have to dive down 20 feet to the freezing water below to avoid getting crushed. Not many trains go through this section of the line, though, but if for any reason I wanted to beat a hasty retreat, there's no way I could cross the bridge in a hurry without having to jump to the cold water below. Again, I pushed my uneasiness down and told myself to focus on how beautiful the spruce trees were on the other side of the river, and before long I disembarked on the other side. A small creek flowed into the river not far from the bridge. My spirits started to rise as I waded across and moved along the riverbank. As soon as I reached the other side, I found moose tracks, more than I've ever seen concentrated in one place before. Big ones, little ones medium-sized. I counted at least 8 different moose that have been passing through the last few hours. I continued along the riverbank, finding more tracks now, with bear and wolf tracks crisscrossing as well. The sheer volume of fresh tracks from large wild creatures was beautiful to see, but also reminded me just how alone I was and how large the wildlife out here can be. I came upon a set of tracks that made me pause. Heading in the same direction I was walking, only a few hours old. Tracks from a large mama bear with 2 good-sized cubs. I decided only to walk another 100 yards or so down the riverbed before turning and heading into the deep evergreen woods. Checking my compass, I took a reading, picked a tree to aim for, and I repeated the process. As I stepped underneath the dark green canopy of the air became suddenly still, the pine needles covering the ground dead, and the sound of my footsteps, and the thick evergreen boughs covered everything in a refreshing shade. Breathing in good green smell, spirits once again began to rise as I trudged off into the forest. After a good stretch of relatively easy hiking, the forest began to grow closer together. More fallen trees and undergrowth blocked my path. This slowed my progress and reduced visibility down to about 5 feet ahead. Still, I knew I must be getting close to the hill that was my destination, so I excitedly pushed on. Climbing over a large fallen tree and jumping down to the other side, my boots clinked as I landed. Looking down, I found myself standing on the bones of several large moose. Now, moose out here can get enormous. A big bull getting over 1,800 pounds is not unheard of. Not many things will mess with such a large, strong, and aggressive creature, as they will fight back ferociously if cornered. Yet here I was on the bones of a large moose. I had no idea what could kill something this powerful and strong. Even large predators tend to avoid them when they're full grown. And it could not have been disease or an accident, because all of these remains were piled together. A poacher, perhaps? But the antlers and skulls were still there. Some people hunt only for the meat, but a moose this big can give you 500 pounds of delicious red meat. Who would possibly need 3 of these, and who could drag 3 of these to one pile? Eventually, as I started to calm down, I realized that whoever or whatever had done this was probably no longer in the area, as these moose have been dead for a few years, I would say. A pack of wolves or coyotes could have easily stripped the meat from the bones left behind by another predator. Taking heart in that, I pushed on, and a few minutes later found myself stepping into a wide circular clearing filled with blueberry bushes. Wild blueberries are a favorite snack of mine, so I happily filled a canteen cup as I walked through the bushes toward the hill I'd been aiming for on the other side. Climbing up to a nice sunny spot, I set down my backpack, decided to rest for a while and eat some of these blueberries that were long overdue. I boiled water in my canteen cup and cooked a pouch of ramen noodles with small pieces of beef jerky in it. Simple food, I know, but it's easy to carry, and it fills you up after a long day of hiking. After my concoction and several handfuls of blueberries, I tipped my hat over to my eyes, leaned back against the old stump to close my eyes and enjoy the sounds of nature for a while. Everything was so peaceful. Everything was so calm. After all, whatever had killed those moose was long gone by now, or I kept telling myself. It probably happened years ago. I was merely guessing. I convinced myself it must have been a poacher long gone now. This was a peaceful place and a restful place, just what I needed after a long week of work. I awoke, and I started looking at the time, realizing I had been asleep for a few hours. The sun was already dropping behind the mountains. There was a large crack. I heard a loud snapping off sticks of the undergrowth. I realized that it must have been the sound of that large moose, maybe one passing through. Placing a hand on my pistol, I quickly swung my backpack on and started to head back to where I had entered the blueberry patch. I had to get away from this large creature. He had came here to feed, and they are very, very dangerous if they're provoked or angered. Finding it, I began to push through the deep undergrowth again, following my compass, the opposite back along the same route that I had used this morning. Suddenly I froze next to a giant fallen tree with the bones of the 3 dead moose But there was a mutilated baby moose there. Its body had been ripped open. Two of its legs were gone, and the head was no longer attached. I stood there frozen, realizing that whatever dragged this here had come by while I was sleeping, only a few hundred yards away. The moss and undergrowth were so thick that I could not see any tracks, but whatever had done this had to be very powerful. Cursing my stupidity at taking an unplanned nap, I came to the quick decision. The creek that I had waded and the river made simple landmarks I could not easily miss. If I left the route I had taken to get there and headed northwest, I should get back to the bridge more quickly. Glancing at my compass, I headed off in the direction. At first I made a good time, but after a while I ran into deep undergrowth. I knew I must be getting close to the river when suddenly I heard another loud crack and crunching sound. Something very large was pushing through the undergrowth, and not even trying to be quiet. I was moving forward as fast as I could and suddenly came out of the trees along the banks of the creek. Crossing over, I turned west, still hearing whatever this enormous thing was crashing through the undergrowth behind me now and coming in my direction. The undergrowth across the creek was not as thick, lots of small evergreen trees and fewer bushes, so I could move more quickly. Behind me I heard a splash. That thing was enormous. This creature, was enormous. It had crossed the creek hot on my heels. Glancing back, I could see the tops of the small trees and the saplings bending and waving as this creature pushed its way through them and past them. I could feel panic building inside me when suddenly I stepped out of the woods and could see the bridge only 20 yards from me. Remembering how difficult it had been to cross with the last of the daylight swiftly disappearing, I decided that trying to run was the worst decision I could make. Drawing my revolver and crossing myself, I whispered a brief prayer, all the while hearing the things get closer and closer. Aiming toward my pursuer, I forced my breath, steady, cocked the hammer back, and summoning every bit of courage I had, roared back into the woods, but as I was armed and not afraid to shoot. The sounds got near, even louder. I bellowed out a final warning. "Get away from me, I'm armed." The footsteps stopped. Still suddenly, behind the trees, I could see a figure covered in thick brown fur, standing on two legs, towering well over 8 feet tall, and wider than any man. It let out a deafening roar, followed by a deep, guttural growl. Focusing all of my willpower not to run, I aimed my .44 and I fired. The bullet struck a tree right in front of this enormous creature. Bark and bits of wood flew everywhere. The echo of my gun rang out through the hills. A distant splash told me it had crossed the creek again. Letting go of a breath I had not realized I was holding, I lowered my gun. As the adrenaline wore off, my hands and knees began to shake. My ears still ringing from the blast of my hand cannon, I removed the spent shell casing and replaced it with another round. If that thing came back, I wanted all 5 shots ready to go in a moment's notice. Holstering my gun, I made my way back across the bridge, as quickly as I could without slipping or falling. My beat-up old pickup truck had never looked more welcoming and inviting, I can tell you that. As I started to drive home and grew more calm, my mind started to race. What the hell was that thing? What could move through the forest so quickly? What had the power to kill a moose like that? Why had it followed me for so long when it easily could have overtaken me? A Bigfoot, maybe? Yeah, that's what it had to be. I looked right at it. I've always been a skeptic, but how can you be a skeptic whenever you look something straight in the eyes? The next day I made up my mind that I wanted some answers. Leaving my heavy backpack behind, I strapped my .44 back on and I loaded my Marlin 4570 guide gun with the heaviest, most powerful, dangerous game loads I could find. I headed back across the bridge, rifle in hand, making my way back to where I had confronted this creature. There on the banks of the creek I found the answer I had been looking for. Even with my rifle in my hands, a knot formed in my stomach at the sight which greeted me. There was tracks, bear tracks, so large that I could not even believe it. I wear a size 12 boot, and my boot fit directly inside of them. My jaw dropped. A bear this size had not believed to even exist in coastal Alaska or on the island of Kodiak. I always figured the tales of monster bears were just hunters spinning yarns. And that's when I looked down the creek and saw it standing on the sides of the bank. Make no mistake, this was a large creature, not a bear, almost human. The thing was so human-like, but yet so monstrous, that I didn't even know how to take it in. It turned and walked off into the woods, as if it had no worries. I turned and left the woods that day, never to return. I feel like we kind of had a understanding at that moment, and I felt like if I went back, I would never return. Yeah, I think that you was probably given a warning by it the last time you seen it, and it's probably good you didn't go back in, because when you see one, there's usually more than one, so they were probably waiting on you, trying to see what you were going to do. And seeing that you did come back with a rifle, they knew you weren't coming back to be peaceful or pick berries, that you had come back to do damage. They knew they had let you leave and didn't hurt you because they followed you and could have got you at any time. But now you've come back with a larger weapon, so they're probably not going to give you that chance again. They know why you was back. What do you all think? Let me know in the comments, guys. And as always, thank you for listening. Smash the like button. Keep your head on a swivel. Don't be something's dinner. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you for listening.